Hi, my name is Martin Smith, and I'm here to talk about going from luminiferous ether to vortex. And I need to be specific about luminiferous ether first, the type that I'm working with. I'm looking at luminous ether as a compression, and that means I'm dealing with small, tiny dots that are just being forced together, and those dots are vibrating just pretty much like air. Most people that look at ether on the dot model or small particle model generally look at it as a solid or liquid, and I'm looking at it as a gas, which is a little bit different. So I'm assuming that they're the distance is about 8 times greater than the diameter of the particle itself, which is about the same as the atmosphere of air that we are dealing with now. So I'm looking at it from not only from a gaseous form, but also a gaseous form with pretty much the same properties of the gas that we're breathing in down here on Earth. And for the vortex wave, I would say a quark, but the properties that I'm applying to quarks is so different that I need to use something else. Video I did on this, I tried using the smoke ring vortex. And on this video, I'm going more with a hurricane or tornado type vortex. Instead of the vortex staying in the plane of the atmosphere, the vortex is moving at the speed of light with spin. Now, at the center of this hurricane, we can measure the distance. Well, whether we have light or electrons, those both have two vortexes to create it, and we can pretty much measure the distance by the frequency, as in these things are moving at the speed of light, or in a photon, the spin of it. And you can measure the distance between the two vortexes through the math equation of amplitude. To get to the smallest part, that is where we take a whole bunch of small quantum dots, put them together, cram them up against each other, and then send them in a single direction. That is a very small, minute part. That one can be formulated with the same equation to get a black hole, and it's quite a bit smaller than the rest of it. You can pretty much take a photon and look at the diameter between the two vortexes and the diameter of the spin, where the spin sweeps out and it has an actual effect, and it's pretty much, the effect is pretty much the same as the wavelength of the photon, but the distance between the two central vortexes is about 10 to the 10th small, 1 times 10 to the minus 10 smaller than. So it's a substantial size smaller. So I have a lot of problems with this, with the first model that I made, and that's why I went to the smoke ring vortex, because this one that I'm going over is just too much to get into. It is too difficult, and I didn't want to do it. So if you have a big problem, you break it up into a bunch of small problems, and you start working each small problem. Most likely I'm going to break it up into a small problem and go on to another matter, and I really want to dig into frequencies from, we have the frequency lattice of the free electron, which makes up our magnetic field. There is a frequency comprised of the electrons going around the nucleus, and those create a lattice which has some control over what's going on in chemistry and light and all the other things. And then we have frequency of the individual electrons themselves and frequencies of the protons and the neutrons. And I'm really wanting to dig into that and do some math on it. So the big catch-22s on ether to vortex waves. One is the Merduuli Principle. If you take the model of a nuclear bomb blast, what happens is when you're at the ground, the blast goes sideways, but as you get up as it's coming outwards, and I'm assuming that it's going at least the sound barrier. And when it gets to a certain point, the velocity of the air creates a Bernoulli effect, which means that the pressure inside that column equals the amount of force that it brings the outside air into it. So it creates a solid column. And that's what I'm thinking the vortexes are doing also, whether it be going around in a circle creating an electron or other elements, or if it's spinning around another one creating a photon. So after the Bernoulli Principle, that is the thing that all physicists know everything about, except for how it actually works on an atom per atom basis. So if you're looking at a mechanical model of the Bernoulli Principle, I've never found one, never seen one. And if you know of one, please put it down in the comments. The vortex forward propagation, I do need that in the models in order to get photon drag. And that being if you have something spinning, such you see it more with aircraft, jet engines that are low to the ground, they'll be spinning and the vortex will come out in front of the air that's being sucked in and go down to the ground and pick stuff off. And that vortex will hit the actual pavement and pick dust and debris off the runway and suck it into the engines. The vortex forward propagation, where it is a bad thing with jet engines, it's something that I'm really, really needing for this vortex model to fit all the things that I'm seeing out in nature. In order for vortexes to exceed or to extend past the initial spin, or where the original spin is, the vibration of the quantum dots has to be substantially faster than the movement of the entire wave, as in the spin itself. So the quantum dot vibration would have to be faster than the motion of the entire vortex as a whole, not the spinning motion, but as the entire vortex. One of the other things that I'm needing is for the dot spin to be zero, as in if we look at ether as a small particle, then that particle is so small that even if it spins, it would have no effect on any other particle. So there's no energy transferred due to a spin for any reason. That means zero energy lost. That pretty much means that space itself is a perpetual motion machine. Now in our little neck of the woods, that being here on Earth, perpetual motion machines are generally wiped out by the fact that atoms themselves can be put into a spin, and when they do, they produce heat and they absorb energy and they release energy. So it pretty much dampens the system out. It sucks energy out of the system itself. One that's real difficult is the centers of vortexes. One of the things I'm looking at proving out is saying that the graviton is pretty much a photon, pretty much the lower energy photons, the radio waves. And one of the reasons why I'm needing the spins of electrons and protons to create lattices, it's one of the things that I've seen it work this way in my mind, but I've not really put it down on paper yet. This principle is what I'm really needing to substantiate a model for the creation of the photon and the absorption of a photon. Also the model for how photons travel through electrons, protons, and neutrons. So one of the things that I'm looking at here is the vortex centers. That they can't be too close, otherwise if you have one center that's always beating up against another, then there's no place for the outside of these vortexes to be spinning. So due to, I'm looking at gravity being photons and low energy photons, that means that the photons themselves would just about be right up on top of each other, going all sorts of directions and really, really close to each other. But they can't be too close, otherwise I see one slowing down the other. And it pretty much implies the canceling of magnetic vortex fields. So then I come into the problem of, well, are we really looking at photons or gravitons coming in and collapsing collapsing matter into black holes? And one of the aspects of that is we're not really looking at photons hitting the surface of the black hole. We're looking at the photon hitting an area of a black hole. So it's not a surface pinch where it, such as way we detonate atomic bombs by focusing an explosion. In this case, we're looking at gravitation going into other matter and other masses and forcing those masses together so that the velocity and the spin exceeds the speed of light, and that exceeding of speeding light would collapse the system. So these are a whole bunch of problems I have going from ether to vortex waves, and I guess I'll go over the paperwork. Okay, again, what I don't have is real easy to go over. I'm going from ether to vortex waves using the quantum dot model of ether. The other model is thinking of the space as being in a vacuum, and then we're dealing with string theory. But again, if you're looking at those two things, if you have vibrations, you're going to have compression and you're going to have vacuum. So it's my opinion that, you know, both of them can be worked out the same way. So yeah, these are my main problems that I'm having, and you can pause it if you want to see them more closely. I don't think they're of that great of value. And on the atomic bomb principle, we have the atomic bomb go up. As soon as the air gets enough speed, it hits the side, and then we have, at one pinch point, the air will separate, and you have the Bernoulli effect where you have pressure coming into it equal to the speed going up. And because I can't, you know, break down the Bernoulli principle, it's really hard to map it into a quantum dot field, because the quantum dots don't have spin, they don't take up energy, and they don't propagate that energy to other places, whereas molecules do. So I'm not sure how the Bernoulli principle actually affects, or how it would map over. So like I said, I've got a lot of really bad problems with this model. Okay, so if we're going to a vortex column, so we're looking at a clump. Let's put that clump right here. A whole bunch of quantum dots that are forced together in a very, very small spot. Like I say, this is 1/10, so you put a 1 and 9, I think it's 9 zeros in front of it, and that's how big the effect of this spin is. It would have a spin in it, and this spin is our gravitation, not gravitation. This spin is our electromagnetic fields, and this is how this model projects that electromagnetic field to come about. And what I'm seeing with electromagnetic lattices is that we have lattices of electrons and protons, and what we're doing is we put 3 of them in a particular place, and as an electron gets here, it somehow magically, unicorn dust and fairy farts, creates or dumps off its extra energy, and it puts it into a pinch point. So we're taking a whole bunch of small, or it focuses a whole bunch of small waves of moving ether into one small point where the Bernoulli Principle takes place, again magically, because I'm not really able to map Bernoulli into this. And it has, with spin and every other property that I need to just magically make this thing happen. And now you know why I'm not happy with this model and why it took me so long to actually work it out. So maybe I'll come up with something later on, and maybe it'll crash and burn like the last one did. And I'll see you on the next video.